What on God's green earth is going on, everyone, and welcome to this latest film review here on the RoAA Angel podcast with yours truly, Angel the Antagonist. It's been quite some time since I've done one of these, and man, it is really good to be back doing what I'm good at, giving you all my unfiltered takes on film, games, and all things in between. For my first review back though, I really wanted it to be on something big, and lo and behold, we just had a major blockbuster come out this past weekend. The film Dog, starring Channing Tatum. Excuse the blunder, my intern who wrote this intro clearly hasn't done their homework and will pay dearly. Everyone, today I will be reviewing The Batman. But first, I just wanted to say, if you're returning to the podcast, welcome back. And if you're new, I really appreciate you being here. Took a long time off to work on some things for myself. And sometimes it is okay to take a much needed break due to burnout or other stresses that this world brings us. But all that matters is that you get up and make a comeback. And this is exactly what we're doing here on RoAA Angel. So thank you very much for joining me. And if you're not following me on Twitter and Instagram, you really need to. That is where you'll get the latest updates on content, giveaways, occasional cosplays, and everything RoAA Angel. Be sure to follow at RoAA Angel on Twitter and Instagram right now.
Armed.
This review will contain massive spoilers, so please watch the film as soon as you can, or stick around and hear what your antagonist has to say about this gothic noir crime tale. You've been warned. The Batman was directed by Matt Reeves and stars Robert Pattinson, Zoe Kravitz, Paul Dano, Jeffrey Wright, and Colin Farrell. This is the first solo Batflick since the Dark Knight trilogy, and as you can imagine, it has come in with a lot of hype. I really wanted to like this film. Everything from the trailers, music choices, soundtrack, aesthetic, and tone, they really had me sold that this could be the Batman film I've always wanted. And while I love the Nolan trilogy for what it was and credit it largely for bringing back the Batman, I always felt those films lacked the thing that makes Batman, well, Batman. Well, as much as I wanted to like this film, I am beaming to say that I loved the Batman, and here's why. At its core, The Batman is a psychological crime thriller first, and a comic book film second. Right from the start, we think we are watching a young Bruce Wayne and his parents being watched by a very uncomfortable presence. However, we soon realize we are seeing the mayor of Gotham's family and are greeted in horrific fashion to Paul Dano's Riddler, as he brutally murders the beloved mayor. Dano's Riddler, much like myself, was a proper antagonist throughout the film, and this scene, which is shot much like a horror scene, was a refreshing change to seeing the Waynes being gunned down for the umpteenth time. The Riddler is a product of the Gotham around him, which is dark and grim, but credit to the director for making this film extremely visually stunning. The use of light and dark corridors and colors ranging from bright reds, browns, and yellows and grays used throughout the cityscape really helped this film establish itself visually in a way that I don't think the Nolan films ever did. This film makes Gotham look like a city ridden with corruption and horrors that lurk in the shadows. Although this film is assumed to take place in the 2020s, I can't help but feel this 90s vibes to it. It could be the use of Nirvana's track Something in the Way or the emo mood in Pattinson's performance, but whatever it is, I really dig it. But at the same time, this film feels very timeless, and what I mean by that is Gotham feels very grounded, but with a dash of comic book magic. Many of the buildings have old Gothic architecture, but are plastered with LED screens and modern aspects that suggest the city is still stuck in its old ways, but is moving along with time as well. Even the inside of Wayne Tower looks like Dracula's castle, but it's still in this modern setting, which for me was a great design choice. The musical score in this film was phenomenal. You'll be humming the main theme for days after viewing. Michael Giacchino provides an old school noir sound to the score that ranges from cool and calm to bombastic and epic. I really can't say this enough, but everything from how this film looks, the music, the overall dark tone are very welcome, and they authentically feel like Batman. Hey guys, newsflash here. I really don't want to hear anything about Robert Pattinson in Twilight anymore. The jokes are old and outdated, and Pattinson has done more than enough to distance himself away from those films. He's done it with films like Good Time, Tenet, and especially with his performance in The Lighthouse, which when I heard he was playing Batman, I immediately thought of this film as a frame of reference for the raw performance I was expecting in this film, and man, he delivered. Pattinson's Bruce Wayne shows a man who is broken but doing his best. You get a sense that he's very uncomfortable with himself and comes off as socially awkward. However, when he suits up as Batman, we see a completely different animal. Pattinson's performance as the Batman really reminded me why I cherish this character so much. Yes, he is brutal and at times depicted as a monster, especially when he enters those rooms from the shadows, accompanied with heavy footsteps and bone-crunching strikes. But for me, it was the detective work that really made me like this Batman so much. We've seen Batman use gadgets to get information in other films, but not as raw as this felt. Pattinson's facial movements and even his eye movements when he was looking around and observing a crime scene provided a glimpse into how he processes information. I would argue that although he's not the world's greatest detective yet in these films, this is the closest to that nickname that we've seen on the big screen. And even though this Batman is much more methodical with his approach to solving crime, that doesn't mean he doesn't have a few amazing gadgets to help him along the way. The one that really stood out to me were the contact lenses that act as cameras for him to basically record everything he sees, so he can go back and watch, almost like how athletes watch game film and take notes. This shows how disciplined yet unhinged Pattinson's Batman is, and you really get a sense that he feels the trauma of his parents' death without the story really making it a major plot point for much of the film. As mentioned before, Paul Dano's Riddler is terrifying, and this is because it's so realistic. The Zodiac Killer-inspired outfit and the Saw-like traps he puts his victims in were definitely a far stretch from the more classical depictions of the character. I thought the Riddler's motivations were justified, and he really makes Batman look in the mirror and see himself from another perspective. And although the Riddler's views are twisted, there does lie some truth into what he is fighting against and who he believes he is fighting for: the broken and the damned. The Riddler also challenges Batman personally by going after the truth of the Wayne family, and what a nice change to the formula that I was originally kind of uncomfortable with, but I definitely grew to appreciate it after some more digesting. I really love the idea that the Waynes were not perfect, and while this doesn't mean the Waynes are now heels, it does show that even the best of the best in Gotham can be tempted for the right reasons. This now takes away whatever positive image Bruce had of his parents, and while it doesn't completely tarnish their legacy, it puts a tragic stain on it. And I feel like this is something his character is going to have to come to grips with over the course of future films. Now, some of the riddles, specifically the Ra's al Ghul one, wasn't as clever as I would have hoped, but all in all, Dano's Riddler is a chilling adversary. I think the scenes where we really get to see this are right at the beginning, when he kills the mayor, and later on when he interrupts the mayor's funeral, where Batman must help the DA solve 3 riddles to remove a bomb from his neck. Really intense stuff there, and superb acting from Peter Skarsgård in that scene. Now, in this film's timeline, Bruce has been at this game for 2 years and has established a relationship with Detective James Gordon, played by Jeffrey Wright. I really loved their bro-like friendship and how much it seemed they trusted each other. It was nice to see established connections from the start, even though this is an entirely new story. It shows that this Gotham has been lived in and makes the city seem that much larger. It also makes you wonder, who else has Batman come across during his brief tenure as Vengeance itself? I'm really not sure if it was just my excitement for the film or whatever, but this is a very long film, clocking in at almost 3 hours, and it really blew by for me in a strange way. This film is definitely not exactly fun, and it is not riddled with pointless action sequences, and every scene feels really important. And for me, it didn't feel like there was a dull moment at any time. For a 3-hour movie, the pacing is really good. This film, as I said earlier, isn't fun and is honestly a pretty stressful watch for first-time viewers, and I don't think it'll be for everyone. Not to say it's super edgy or anything, but if you enjoy slow burn crime stories, I think this film is really for you. If I had to pick something I really didn't like as much, it was definitely the subplot involving Catwoman. Zoe Kravitz is an amazing actor and does an amazing job with the character, and I want to see more of her. But the plot with her and Falcone being her father, it just fell flat for me. And I think this film could have maybe cut out a bit of runtime by just focusing on the Batman and the Riddler in a battle of wits, rather than just having Catwoman in the film doing whatever. Again, I do like the portrayal and I like the character and I want to see more of her. I just feel like if you're going to have Catwoman in this film, make her more a part of the main plot rather than just having her feel like a side story for Batman to partake in. With that said, Kravitz and Pattinson have amazing chemistry, and for me, their relationship didn't feel forced at all. I think that this is a great introduction for the character of Catwoman, but I just wish she had more to do rather than just get revenge on Falcone. As mentioned before, this film is detective heavy, but it is a superhero film, right? So there's got to be some fights. Seeing Batman's suit actually be useful was incredible. You have no idea how happy I was seeing bullets ricochet off his armor and how cool the suit looked just in general. Definitely Arkham Knight inspired with the separate plating, and the collar around the cowl is such a nice touch. But back to the fights. It is implied that Alfred taught Bruce how to fight, and man, it shows. He is not the most graceful and not the most fluid and gets punched by goons all the time who get a few lucky hits in on him. And I really love this because it shows that he is not the polished martial artist we are all used to, and he is still learning and trying to figure out this whole Batman thing. And learning this whole Batman thing goes beyond the detective work and even the combat skills. This also applies to his purpose. The film's ending is really sort of a downer in the grand scheme of things. We see the Riddler is successful in flooding Gotham and thousands of lives are lost throughout the city. However, it is how Batman responds to this crisis where he realizes what he must become, and we see his character development go from being a symbol of fear and vengeance to a symbol of hope for those in need. And that is where the Riddler is unsuccessful. The closing moments of Batman carrying a citizen out of the rubble with others following behind him almost brought a tear to this antagonist's eye. But in all seriousness, this ending was extremely different, satisfying, and really set up a lot for future films. Which brings me into that moment. So basically, the Joker is teased at the end of the film, and he has a chat with Riddler in Arkham. And I gotta say, I'm not sure how I feel about this. The reason why I was even excited to see this film was because it was using villains not seen on the big screen in years, and it felt fresh. I feel like doing the Joker in the next film or even future films would be taking a step back for the franchise, and just going with the character that every edgelord couple simps over. I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I've had enough of the Joker, and I really want to see more villains become household names. I want to see villains like the Court of Owls, Ventriloquist and Scarface, Mad Hatter, Hugo Strange, and even ones that have been in movies before, but this time done right, like Mr. Freeze and Poison Ivy. I have no idea what Matt Reeves has in store for us in the future, but I hope that it doesn't involve another solely focused Joker story. Seriously, the character is starting to edge on overrated at this point. All in all, is this the Batman film I've always wanted? I can't say it entirely is, but it damn sure is on the right track. This is really the most Batman film ever, I think. And while I loved the Nolan trilogy, the films with Batman Begins aside felt more about the villains and less about Batman. I think this was not by design and definitely a credit to both Heath Ledger and Tom Hardy's performances, but they never felt like they were about Batman, and those villains kind of overshadowed those movies for me. This film, however, really dives into what makes the character so lovable and makes him more than just a rich guy that fights crazy criminals. It shows Bruce himself is insane and has a lot of issues he needs to work over and is very conflicted with his emotions. And we're just lucky that he's on the right side of justice. And with that said, I think this is a great opportunity to introduce the official Root of All Angel review scale. Thank you. Pretty simple. 1 being dog shit, 2 being pretty bad, 3 being mid, 4 being great, and 5 being root-tacular, which is the pinnacle of entertainment. I give The Batman a 4 out of 5. Great film, great story. It could have been more focused and some of the dialogue wasn't the best, but overall, this is a damn good time. Can't wait for future installments to this story. I really think Warner Brothers and DC have found a really sweet spot for their comic book films. With Joker and now this film, I think letting directors use their vision for more self-contained stories is the way to go, and making movies that don't have to fit in a universal mold is really quite refreshing. I love universe building as much as the next guy, but when it comes down to it, I just want a really good story without any restrictions. And it looks like WB President Tony Emmerich agrees, after years of trying to do the opposite. In a recent statement, Emmerich says, quote, "Quality is the most important factor for a studio, and the biggest thing you can do to influence quality is the filmmaker that you hire," end quote. And I say, here's to more of that. Thank you all so much for listening to this latest Root of All Angel review, brought to you by yours truly, Angel the Antagonist. For more content, follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Root of All Angel, and look out for more in the upcoming weeks. And make sure you give this podcast a 5-star root-tacular on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. This will really help me out with the podcast and allow me to make more cool shit. Anyway, have a good one, guys.